Hello everyone, it's Player X here. Today I want to go over how to run combat in Pathfinder 2nd Edition in a much quicker way and faster way, because I see a lot of the same things happening online where people are asking, how do I roll this and how do I roll that, so I just wanted to go over really quick. So this is our adventuring party here. On the left we have the barbarian elf Sky. Next is the changeling witch, Nyla. Then we have here the puppet bard, Crick Crack. Next to that is Avexi, the orc rogue. And here we have Kristoff, the cleric. And this is the party I run, our DM for. And so this is how I run combat. So first things first is initiative. So the way initiative works is depending on what you're doing beforehand in combat is going to determine what you're rolling for initiative. Now, for 90% of the time, that's going to be perception. So you're going to have each of the players are going to roll perception, and then you're going to roll your monster's perception. If you are dealing with multiple monsters, group them in. If it's very large groups, break them into two groups, and then roll initiative for them. If you're rolling, now one of the most common things that you're going to roll before that is stealth. And so before combat starts, you're going to roll a stealth check and have the opponents roll a perception check if they're unaware. Anyone who beats their perception check gets to go first. So it's just rolling different skills for initiative. Example is if the bard is doing a performance before combat starts, or he's trying to distract them before combat starts, you'd have them roll a performance check instead for initiative. Don't worry too much about the ins and out of cover, half cover, concealed, not concealed, and find. Those things are just going to bog you down. Just have them roll a stealth check versus perception check. The way I run ambush rounds, so if the enemy gets the drop on the players, or the players get a drop on the enemy, for many reasons, they're hiding in the trees and the players aren't looking, or whatever reason, the way I do it is have everybody roll initiative normally, have the enemies roll for stealth for initiative, and have the players roll perception, and then give whoever did the sneak attack or the ambush round, I give them all one free action. It's very simple. Most times you want your creatures to get into position or make free ranged attacks, and that way when combat starts, they're in a more advantageous position than the players are. For players, giving them one action allows them to reposition if they're the casters to get out of the way, or to make sure that they can use some of their buffs, such as Crick Crack the Bard. He can cast his buff spell. And then for all the melee characters, it allows them to run into combat, or for ranged characters, it allows them to cast to shoot or to do what they have to before that. And for the rogue Avexi, if he gets an attack off during the ambush round or during the stealth initiative, then he gets to add his sneak attack. So that way it's very freeform. You guys get one action to do whatever you want for moving and flanking. For movement and flanking wise, when in combat, if the creatures are smart enough, usually if they don't have a penalty to combat, I will move the creatures around to flanking positions. That way you can get the -2 to the AC, and it is advantageous for you to do that. Next, we'll move these guys aside. We'll bring in the large group of rat folk. So when dealing with large groups of enemies, if you are DMing, your best way to do it is, for one, to do a group initiative for them, so they all go at the same time. And I would not do 3 actions for all of them. I limit them to 2 actions. First action is usually a movement action, and then an attack action, so repositioning and then attacking, or 2 attacks based on range and stuff like that, or they'll have a special ability which uses 2 actions, such as casting a spell or something like that. When dealing with large groups, don't do 3 actions, because it's going to bog them down. For a group of 5 enemies, you're talking about 15 actions you have to perform before the players get to go again, and you want your moves to be very quick as a DM. So limit them to 2 actions. If for any narrative reason the players want to know why. In Path of the Righteous, the adventure path, or no, Return of the Rune God. What is it? Forget the adventure it is, but there is an explanation of what goblins are doing at the beginning of fight, and it's like they're chaotic creatures that are trying to destroy the scenery and all this other stuff. So they're wasting an action doing that instead of attacking and becoming, getting involved. So you can have that, or you can just say that these creatures are not as powerful and they're not fully fledged monsters, so they have less actions. So after that is dealing with large mobs. Usually large mobs, another way I would deal with them is to limit them to 1 HP depending on how high level they are, or how strong you want them to be. Usually they're great for flanking, or for throwing the party off guard, or forcing them to use AoE spells, things like that. Now for larger creatures, this is a blue Oni that the party had to face the other day. For larger creatures, such as boss mobs, things like that, the best way to do it is to make a list of things that they are going to do in combat so that your turn is very quick. Don't waste your time on the thousands of different things that the enemy can do unless it's like a very epic level battle, such as with a dragon or something like that. Just make a list of the order of things they want to do stuff. Usually for caster types, it's cast these certain debuff spells and then or start it off if they're grouped together with fireballs and make your way from there. Don't make it very video gamey where they have a set pattern. This way that your turn comes very quickly. Now when dealing with spellcaster type enemies or things that have many abilities, make a list. If this is happening, then I'll do this. If this, then this. That way it can speed up your turns, because mostly you want your players to be doing things because they're the ones that are going to take the longest on their turns. So knowing ahead of time what the monster can do and what it prioritizes more than anything is going to help a lot. Boss mobs are usually 2 to 3 levels higher than the group's level. So for example, the group I'm playing with now is 4th level, so usually throwing a 6th to 7th level creature at them is usually a very hard challenge. Know this ahead of time. They can do a lot of damage, and the main thing is they have really high AC. We're talking that sometimes the party will need to roll higher than a 15 to hit them. You need to stress that they are very hard to hit, and that the party needs to use tactics and things like flanking and debuffs and spells that are going to cause conditions to them. Those are the things that are going to turn the tide of battle. Now, these battles are always going to take long because there's a lot of things to do, and there's a lot of status effects and all this other stuff. But the best way is to know ahead of time what you want the creature to do and what is it trying to accomplish in this fight. Next up is Animal Companions. Crick Crack, the bard, has a hyena companion, and these things, sometimes they act on their own, sometimes they have to waste actions. Things like summoning spells can slow down combat. Just, again, limit the number of actions they can do, or make sure that the players ahead of time know what those things can do. Things like summoning creatures, make sure they have a list of what the creature can do, and since they have less actions anyway, just make sure that they're well aware that they're going to have to take those turns on the player's turn. Next up is how to deal with terrain. So I've got these pillars here, and I got some gargoyles here. So the way cover works, it's a very complicated system in 2nd edition Pathfinder. Half cover, full cover, concealed, not concealed, all these things. The best way to deal with any of this stuff is to, if it's around half cover, they get +2 to AC and they're considered concealed. Full cover, they can't be hit, all this other stuff. The best way to deal with it is just give them +2 to their AC, counteracts any flat-footed condition they have. If it needs to go into details, I would recommend picking up the Dungeon Master's Guide, which on the far right screen, it says all the conditions that are applied to this. I wouldn't worry too much about the exact number or any of that stuff, because that's going to slow things down. Again, just giving a +2 is fine, and being concealed usually helps a lot. Concealed is before a creature makes let's say an attack, they have to roll a d20, and if they get a 5 or lower, then the effect automatically fails. So Leaving it at that is fine enough. If a creature is behind a wall or something, they can't be hit. So just say that they can't be hit, and the creature's going to have to reposition. I wouldn't worry too much about having to bog yourself down with all that other stuff. Now, for casters, casters can do a lot to your creatures. They are quite annoying, and they can debuff a lot. And they can usually turn the tide of battle very quickly. So stress to your players to use buffs and debuffs, as it is very important. And have mostly your creatures don't really need to do this. I find that creatures usually with debuffs and buffs won't really last that long. They only last maybe 2 rounds. And then, they die and it doesn't really matter. Things like prolonged effects such as disease and poisons work a little better because they have effects that keep going outside of combat, and it can be quite powerful. Other things to remember if one of the players goes down, that their initiative switches to before the creature that just downed them works. So if, let's say, it's the Oni's turn and he downs Nyla's initiative moves to before the Onis, so that the party has a full turn to get to her before she can do anything. So remember that for your creatures, if they go down, they go down. Last thing to note here is to keep it moving. If the party is winning, if they're very much going to win the battle, there's 3 minion guys left, and they barely got any HP, just wrap it up. Don't prolong the fight more than it needs to be, and they're just now trying to roll for hits and stuff. And if combat usually lasts more than 5 or 6 rounds, have the enemy retreat. Have them run away. Have them regroup with other creatures. Have them do other things. Then allow the combat to just keep going. It's going to get stale. Add in new factors. Maybe a group of reinforcements comes if the players are losing. Bring in an assistant or an environmental change or something like that. But just keep the combat moving. Don't worry. Again, Pathfinder has a lot of conditions and a lot of things that are happening during combat. And bogging yourself down with these things can slow it down significantly. And most times, the most important thing is to allow the players to do all their cool shit. That's why they leveled up. And to keep your enemies on a consistent basis. Again, a little bit more like a video game type situation. Again, if you're dealing with a very smart creature such as a high-level enemy wizard or a group of military-trained veterans, something like that, then yes, take your time. Allow combat to go long. Most combats in Pathfinder 2nd Edition should last somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour, where more harder combats can go anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. And again, have fun. If your players seem like this is a drag or something like that, end the combat early. Allow creatures to run away. And remember, if you're running with, if you're doing experience points, as long as they've dealt with the situation, they gain experience. So even if half of the enemies run away, technically in the books, you would reward full experience, and this allows players to understand that it's not just killing things to death that allows them to gain experience, but there are many multiple things. And yeah, so guys, that is the video. Let me know what you guys think. Any other tips and tricks, leave in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys later. See ya.